Hi everybody, welcome back to the Redeemed Roots channel. I'm so glad you decided to join me for the second part of our relevant series. So today we're going to be in 2 Chronicles again, 2 Chronicles chapter 20, looking at verses 31 through 37. So Jehoshaphat reigned over Judah. He was 35 years old when he became king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 25 years. His mother's name was Azubah, daughter of Shihli. He followed the ways of his father Asa and did not stray from them. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. The high places, however, were not removed, and the people still had not set their hearts on the God of their ancestors. So to begin with, I want to look at this first section, these first couple verses, and point out a few things. The first thing is that around this time, Jehoshaphat's about 60 years old, and he follows the ways of his father Asa. And if you want to read more about King Asa, you can look at 2 Chronicles 14 through 16, those chapters, and learn more about the life of Asa. But Asa was a king who also sought the Lord, and that was one thing that his reign was known for. If you go back and you see over and over again and that Asa was a king that sought the Lord, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. And he taught his son to also follow the ways of the Lord and to also seek God. And it says that Jehoshaphat didn't stray from the ways of the Lord. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord. But when we get to verse 33, there's kind of a subtle transition, as the high places were not removed, and the people still had not set their hearts on the God of their ancestors. And it demonstrates a little bit of half-heartedness in the way that Jehoshaphat's devoted to God. While Jehoshaphat's willing to look at God whenever there's times of trouble, he's willing to seek God for the majority of his reign. When it comes down to really taking out some of those things that lead the people and lead him away from seeking God, he's not willing to do it, and it's not something that's at the forefront of his mind. And as followers of Jesus, another thing that we ought to be concerned with is what are those things that exist within our own hearts, our own lives, that are things that distract us from Jesus and that distract us from our relationship with him in the long run, but yet many times we're not willing to remove them. Maybe we don't see the importance of removing them. Maybe we just think we'll work on it and we'll deal with it later. And as we see in later chapters of 2 Chronicles, this is a problem that's dealt with later. But why not Jehoshaphat? Why wasn't he the one that decided that they'd had enough of worshiping false gods and decided to tear down these high places that he'd set up, that had been set up in Judah? And also, it says that the people had still not set their hearts on the God of their ancestors. And the reason I used the word half-hearted earlier was because there's part of their heart and part of their worship that wasn't fully focused on God. And I think if you would examine your own life, like I examine my own life, there are places in our own hearts, our own lives, that we've not set our hearts on God. And while we desire to follow God and we want to follow God, our heart's really set on him, and set on listening to his voice and following through and even taking down some of those things in our lives that we might not want to. In verse 34, it says that the events of his reign are recorded in another book in 35. It talks about a really interesting part of the reign of King Jehoshaphat. He makes an alliance with another king, with the king of Israel, whose ways were wicked. And at first glance, it really doesn't seem like the king of Judah makes an alliance with the king of Israel. They're both Israelites. It should be fine. But the king of Israel and the kingdom of Israel had not followed God, had not sought after the Lord at all, had kept the high places up, but had done nothing to really look to God in any way, shape, or form. And this alliance was not something that God supported, but we don't see Jehoshaphat ever once going to God and saying, hey, is this something that I need to be involved in? Is this something that I need to do? Instead, he makes this alliance, and it doesn't end up going very well. They construct a fleet of trading ships so they can trade back and forth. And after they're built, a prophet comes to Jehoshaphat and says, hey, look, God didn't want you to do this. This isn't a good idea. And so what God is going to do is destroy these trading ships. And so the trading ships are destroyed. And there's this little piece at the very end of Jehoshaphat's life where it wasn't Jehoshaphat was perfect, and Jehoshaphat sought after the Lord in every circumstance and every opportunity. He looked to God. We don't see that because there's this little thing at the very end, and I have to wonder if one of the reasons why we have this section in here is because his heart wasn't fully devoted to God. And when our hearts aren't fully devoted to God, sometimes we make alliances and we make allegiances with things that we are never supposed to become involved in, and we're never supposed to give our hearts to. And so I would challenge you as you think about this next week and as you walk through life to really begin to examine your own heart. Are there any places where you've made an alliance or allegiance to something that God didn't support and that God didn't want? And instead of checking with Him first, you've just allowed this thing to enter into your life and to begin to really consume what happens, because I guarantee you God is going to take the necessary steps to weed it out of your heart and make sure that your gaze is focused directly on Him. But sometimes it's a little bit easier when we notice that before. And I wonder what would have happened if Jehoshaphat had noticed that wasn't a good idea and not chosen to do that. Maybe this whole entire fleet of trading ships that he built wouldn't end up destroyed. We'll never know. But it's just a challenge to you to think about some things in your own life, in your own heart, that you might want to begin searching and working on and working out. Above all, set your heart fully on God. And that's what the main purpose of today's message is. I hope that you all have a wonderful week and that you'll check back on the Redeemed Roots channel and see the next part of our 2nd Chronicles series. We'll be looking at 2nd Chronicles chapter 21 next time.